Good afternoon, everyone, and good morning to Cody. My name is Adele Dunn, and I work within the Health Improvement Division of the Public Health Agency. You are all very welcome to our lunchtime talk with Cody Goldberg from Harper's Playground. And this is part of Disability Awareness Week NI, led by Derry City and Strabane District Council and funded through the Public Health Agency. The purpose of today's talk is to inspire and promote innovation in creating truly inclusive play parks. Louise, Boyce and I came across Cody whilst we were researching to put this programme together, and we're very excited for you all to hear his message around designing physically, emotionally and socially inclusive play parks. I just want to take this opportunity to thank Anya McMullen from Project Echo, who has helped us sorting out everything technically with running this event. And I'll now pass you over to Louise Boyce, Access Inclusion Officer for Derry City and Strabane District Council and Coordinator of Disability Awareness Week Northern Ireland. Thank you.
Thank you, Adele. And I just want to talk about some house rules so that everybody is aware that today's session will be recorded for colleagues who are unable to attend today and to reach others who just couldn't make this time slot. So it's great that you've all added your names to your videos. If you do not want to be seen within the video, please turn your video off. It's important as well that we keep muted throughout the conversation until opportunity comes for questions and answers. Now, there will also be an opportunity for yourselves to put your questions into the chat box as we go, and I shall monitor them. So if you would please, and you would like to say your question yourself, can you please note that with your question? Otherwise, we will just read them out to myself or Adele. Without anything else to add, I'd like to proudly introduce Cody Goldberg.
Yeah, Cody, if you just unmute that you.
How's that for a start? Okay. I thought somebody else had muted me. I'll try that again. Take two. Hello and thank you. Thanks for that warm introduction. Everybody plays. Everybody needs play. Harper's Playground is committed to making sure that that takes place. Throughout my talk, I certainly hope that you will form your important questions for me, because I do a lot of talking and I will get very passionate about this subject. If you don't take down some notes and ask me questions, I may miss something that you really care about, because I care so deeply about this subject. I will explain the little silhouette of the little girl in the Harper's Playground that you see on the screen. And I will explain that there really are two key functions for Harper's Playground: a nonprofit organization dedicated to building a type of playground, and most importantly to me, actually, a very succinct and strict yet flexible design ethos that we outline. So we're talking about my slides are not moving. Hold on. There we go. We're talking about playgrounds. It sounds to me as if you all are already aware that this is not the best playground for everybody. But just in case some of you are not fully aware, I will share two key things that you're seeing in this picture that really drive my passion for changing this model. First and foremost, recognize that all of these children are engaged in play singularly. And that really is one of the many negative outcomes of the playground structure. It does not foster social play. It is also by definition, what we would call structured play. And anyone familiar with childhood development knows that unstructured play, self-directed play, has the greatest value for the child's healthy development. Now we're talking about disability awareness and inclusion, and there's another very obvious issue with this playground in that it assumes children who use wheelchairs actually don't need them. This is a bona fide playground from a manufacturer that you can find in a catalog anywhere. Now, I want to share with you my 3 goals for this talk. During my introduction, I heard the word inspire, and I certainly hope to inspire you all to make changes, to take action because of how important this work is. And a key goal will be to educate you on how you can take some of those steps. But sandwiched between those 2 very important words, I do hope to entertain you. And that's why I have shared a photo of my father and myself. He was a taxi cab driver in San Francisco at the time I was born. He wore those pants regularly. And therefore, there was no future for me possible other than to be a playground designer. I'm not an academic, but I am familiar with academic pursuits, and I appreciate all the academics out there. I am a playful person, as genetically handed down to me by my father, and I'm committed to making sure everybody gets the play they deserve. Now, I mentioned that I will explain this silhouette. This is an integral component of our branding and our logo, and it's really because it's our inspiration. Now, this is my daughter, Harper. Harper, at the age of 4, took this walk in the park that you see her engaged with here. It was the very first time she was ever walking on her own. Now, of course, she was supported by her walker, but this was the very first day she took her own steps at the age of 4. And that experience for us on that day motivates me and inspires my work. Now, before I jump into the full content, I want to share a little orientation. I'm here in Portland, Oregon, which apparently is an 18-hour and 10-minute flight from your neck of the woods. And I'm very honored to have 2 new, not just friends, but Facebook friends, actually, who were my introduction team. So thank you very much for having me here. And I look forward to my in-person visit someday soon. This is the walk that I mentioned to you all. This is the foundation for our organization and really for my passion. Everybody has and deserves the right to play. Now, who is April Goldberg? You might guess from the last name. That is my wife. This whole movement was of her thinking. She was the one on this day who said that inaccessible playgrounds should be a thing of the past, and we should be the ones to do something about it. So I owe the greatest debt of gratitude for the work I get to do to my wife, who really pushed this forward. Please don't take my wife's word for this alone. I have backup. The United Nations has declared play so vital to childhood development that it is a right of every child. And I'm the one who underlined that. That's my own underline. But I really want to marinate on that subject for just a second here, just allow you all a chance to think about what every child really means. When you get into the work of designing a play park and you think about perhaps compromising on where every child might really actually fit in, I beg of you, 0 compromise. Every child would mean they can get everywhere when you're designing a space. And this is the most important thing I could impart upon you all today. Now, I love to talk about play. I've done a 22-minute TED Talk that essentially was focused on play. I want to get into the meat of the conversation, which will really be about design and how we design for good play. But I found a new tool I'm sharing, this one on just the very simple formulation of how children develop skills through play. I love this feedback loop. And because this is being recorded and I'll share the talk with everybody, I'm not going to read through every piece, but I will read this just incredible quote from the National Institute for Play here in the U.S. It's affiliated with Stanford University. One of my mentors in play theory, Dr. Stuart Brown, and he says, "Play is the gateway to vitality. By its nature, it is uniquely and intrinsically rewarding. It generates optimism, seeks out novelty. I think maybe this is the most important, makes perseverance fun. If this year has taught us anything, and if human history has taught us anything, perseverance could well be the most important human skill that we could ever nurture in our children. Of course, leads to mastery, and that's what this wheel is about, right? Gives the immune system a boost, fosters empathy, and promotes a sense of belonging and community." So not a bad start, and that's just the tip of the iceberg for how important play is. Now, if we accept those things, then knowing, as you all do, that the playground, there's a problem with it, right? This is another problem. This is the playground industry's answer to accessibility. This otherwise rat maze that offers very, very little play value. Especially if you're a child who uses wheels, you're following a maze. That may actually be fun for one pass, but it's not an actual place where group play happens. My long-standing joke, and forgive me if you've already seen some of my videos, but this to me looks about as fun as standing in line at the airport. So scrap that, and we know that there's another key issue with this image. It's devoid of nature. The interaction with this space is all metal and plastic. Now, I think it sounds like from the cue of the experts on this panel, you're all very aware that providing access to nature has benefits to the human condition. And here are just some of the myriad reasons we need to be providing everybody, especially people who experience disability, who the natural world, very much of the natural world, is not accessible to them. And I would never advocate for paving the whole world, because we would be ruining nature then. So we will never make all of the natural world fully accessible. But when we design a play park, we must make it natural and accessible, because our friends who use wheels to get around, so much of the world is not accessible to them. In America, and I'm not sure how well you guys are embracing this yet, there's a new movement afoot to build nature parks. So this is a play park actually here in Portland, Oregon, very well designed from a nature component standpoint, but zero accessibility. And really, this is the heart of the Harper's Playground message, is that we must combine accessible and natural together, and with zero compromise on either level. So there are three problems that I want to outline for you specifically that the Harper's Playground model is addressing in our work. First, globally, I know especially here in the US, there is an epidemic in lack of play for children. There are other things competing for children's attention. Of course, we know about the digital world and how children are getting on digital devices too early in their lives. It's actually a problem that children are being pushed into organized sports too early in their lives as well. Quite frankly, that's a more organized and directed by adults activity, and children truly need to be left to play without overdue influence from outside forces, because that's when their brains are having the greatest development. So we must change our ways to address the lack of play that children are getting. That's a problem. The other problem, of course, our greatest focus for this week, is that historically, and still to this day, far too often, people who experience disability are left in isolation. Isolation and disconnection from community is one of the most negative impacts on human health. It's also just not right. And finally, more and more, the cities that we're designing, the communities that we're designing, the lives that we're designing for people leave them disconnected from the natural world and from one another. This is why it's so important that we build community play parks that are universally accessible but natural. My passion for this work goes back to my daughter, Harper. And this is the story I will share with you to just reflect on how important this work is to me and why I'm committed. And thanks to my hosts here, I'm committed to changing the world for the better. My daughter Harper, I mentioned, didn't learn to walk until she was 4 years old. At birth, she couldn't breathe on her own, and the hospital was ready to give up. We refused, and a doctor was called in from a hospital across town and saved her life. We were in the intensive care unit for an entire month, and it was at the end of that month that we were told that Harper had a genetic difference. It's called Emmanuel syndrome. And we were informed that we should expect her to never walk or nor talk in her lifetime. It was around this time in my life, which was a very difficult time, as you might imagine, that I took to prayer, and I asked for some way, something I could dedicate my life to change the world for my dear Harper, because I instantly, on being told she would never walk or talk in her life, thought that this world is a very dangerous and cruel place for people like her. And I could not accept that. And so this work that I'm doing is intended to make the world a more welcoming and safer place for her. And that is why the passion is so strong. This is the day that my prayers were answered. This is the day that I listened to the woman in the red sweater describe what has really become the Harper's Playground philosophy, which is very, very simple. And it's most important that it's not complicated. It doesn't take a rocket scientist like me, I'm not a rocket scientist, what it takes is commitment. It takes commitment to getting it right. And this was the day that I heard from this woman about how brain development works through natural play. And with tears in my eyes in this room where I took this picture, I decided that I would be bringing this philosophy to the rest of the world. This woman charges $25,000 for a one-day session. And it was on that day that I declared, well, that's too much. I will give this away. Everybody should know this magical formula that is a different play park. So think about the first play park I showed you. This is the design that Harper's Playground became on that day. It really actually pushed the limits beyond what the woman in that photo, her name is Susan Goltzman, and she's since passed, but I think it's very important for me to pay her tribute for the gift she gave me that day. And I will add, she didn't charge us $25,000. She donated her services because she saw how passionate I was about building a special playground for my daughter Harper. And at the time that had happened, I didn't know exactly how this would unfold forward, but I knew I would commit the rest of my life to it. We really pushed and pushed and pushed to make sure everywhere. So what you're seeing in this image here is a beautiful blend of a naturescape that I'll give you lots of greater details on in the coming slides, but it follows some very, very, very important rules about access and nature. That's the drawing. This is a series of images of what that actually translated into. And what I hope you see from this is a place that doesn't quite look like a playground. And that's very intentional. We believe wholeheartedly that play is something not just for children, that a play park, while it needs to be focused on being centered around children and allowing for children to get the greatest play, adults need play, and adults participating in play alongside children has some of the greatest benefits to them. And it creates more of a community gathering space than a place where just children play. This is really, really important. It's also, I think, pretty darn gorgeous. But most importantly, really, these types of things happen there. children of different abilities able to connect. And here they are not even in play, right? But in conversation. And sometimes verbal play is important, or just making a friend. This is also important. I mentioned adults need play. They also need to be able to be alongside their children when they play. This woman shared with us on the day we met her at the park that she bought her house adjacent to the park just so she could live next to Harper's playground. So this is the very first Harper's playground. She shared with us that this was the first experience she had of pushing her son on a swing, and that it was such a dream for her. Now, I'll give you, and in my introduction, I think it was Adele who mentioned our standards. This is the Harper's Playground standard. This is both simple and profound, but what we call radically inclusive through 3 levels of inviting design. Accessible means everyone can get everywhere. Adaptive means the features that we've chosen have the greatest use for the greatest variety of people, to the greatest extent possible. We use nature and community design so that it's socially inviting. And then by being very thoughtful about the placement of every item, especially seating, frankly, seating is one of the most overlooked components of a good play park. Seating is wonderful because it not only allows an elder to have a rest, but seating offers a climbing structure for a little child. Children love to play on things that were not designed for play. And so actually not focusing all these play components in one area and making that plaza gives that child that unstructured, self-directed, better for their brain development space. And then of course, if it's not beautiful, it's not well designed. An important element of good design, form follows function, but if it's not beautiful, it's not going to function right. It must be beautiful. And Harper's Playground, because it bears my daughter's name, and she is the most beautiful. Well, I have 2 daughters. They're both beautiful. Must be beautiful. And those are things that make the spaces emotionally inviting. I'm going to give you guys now a deep dive into Arbor Lodge Park. Just some of the components. I'll do another deep dive on one of our next parks. And then I'll finish with just a tutorial basically on how to go about laying it out. So this is what we call the as-built drawing for Arbor Lodge Park. And I'm going to dive into how the individual features function. First and foremost, you'll notice this. This is an astroturf covered hill. Now I advocate nature. If you were to cover this hill in real grass, it would be gone in a day. The children would gleefully scrape it off, and maybe with rain. So astroturf is very important for this particular feature. But you will see here just some of the ways it gets utilized. So this image on the left of these children simulating and actually participating in mountain climbing, right? You're witnessing collaborative play, physical activity that's healthy, coordination, strength, just a phenomenal thing to see that you would not see on that structure, that you could not see on that structure. Oh wait, I'm sorry, I want to go back. The other thing you see here is a father engaged in play with his child. Incredibly important to have adults pulled off their chairs whenever possible to participate. Not only is it healthy for them, it's really important for children to see adults in play as well. The hill is incredibly functional for sliding, which is great for the human experience. It also shows actually planning for play. When children bring cardboard to the play park, it shows that they're actually planning for the future, and then very important part of executive function skills. And of course, the hill is all weather. We have some snow here in Portland on occasion, not every year, but it's a beautiful thing to see that it's all year long. The hill offers an opportunity for very, very rambunctious play, and children need to get a little bit rambunctious. It's very, very important for that sort of wrestling and really testing limits. but you'll see that the hill is perfectly acceptable for a father and a daughter to have a very quiet moment. The Harper's Playground Hill has become the element that is copied around the country now. And I can't stress enough how valuable this very, very simple design element is. The next feature I want to share with you is an elevated sand table. This was the most custom piece, really, other than the hill, that we designed. So as you can see, it was designed to allow a wheelchair user to have access to wet sand. And for children to actually be able to play with wet sand, that is some of the most important parts of the play experience. And of course, making that universally accessible, so incredibly important. So just a few images of how this works. Now, there's a famous playground designer who said, in the typical playground, sometimes the most valuable feature for play is the water fountain. And that is because water has such great value to play with. And when it mixes with sand and you can shape your own environment, it really calls out for that collaborative play and that tactile feedback. In our play park, children make sandcastles, they leave toys for other children, and we've actually one time witnessed a child buried up to their neck, which is pretty awesome. So we advocate deep sand so you can do such an activity, but bringing wet sand into the neighborhood is a really important thing. Not every child can go to the beach. I know you all have a lot of good beaches, but the beach is not accessible to everybody. Now, I mentioned adaptive features. One of the most important is the swing. And this is the model that we've chosen. Is very important for a child like Harper, you can see. And her sister Lennon is also enjoying it. To be able to keep swinging when they outgrow the infant swing. So you can see we like to do a 6-bay swing. You have two of each main type, 2 accessible swings, 2 infant swings, and 2 typical swings. And when they're all flowing, it's a sight to behold. It's very important. And we also advocate for art. We're really trying to blur that line between the traditional playground and a public park. They fuse together, and artwork functions not only as a storytelling piece, but that's a big part of the imaginative and tactile play that you can see here. Finally, on Arbor Lodge Park, a key function, a key piece of the design element is circular seating areas. And that really speaks to those community gathering spaces. I really like this photo actually for the fact that it reveals children using it to store their gear while they're over on the picnic tables there. But on beautiful days, you'll see the whole space packed with people engaged in conversation. Before this design, every park I remember visiting had benches by themselves, which just seemed like odd to me when a community space should be about pushing people to be together. Years later, I've come to learn from people in the deaf community that this type of design element is really important to them because they read lips, and being pushed into situations where face-to-face contact is encouraged makes the space even better for them. The circle is also a really important design symbol. It's a good space. So those are some of the key elements of Arbor Lodge Park, our very first one. I'm now going to share our second project in Portland, Oregon, that was even a little larger and yet still completely based on the Arbor Lodge Park design, with the hill in the center, and some specifics on how that design is now utilized in really beautiful ways. So this first series I want to share, I love this so much. This is a young girl named Stella, and this is from the grand opening of this really special park. And she was there with her caregiver. So this is a really wonderful thing. When a child is lucky enough to have a caregiver in their lives, it allows the parent that little bit of respite if they have a place to go to like this. So the parent was actually resting on this day. because caring for children who experience disabilities can be, quite frankly, extra stressful. Raising any child is pretty stressful, as we know. Sometimes a child with extra needs just makes it a little bit extra stressful. So a chance for respite for a parent is such an important part of this story. And these spaces often allow for that respite time. But you can see the joy in Stella's face as she can navigate absolutely everywhere. Now, if this space really only worked for people who use wheels, that would not be inclusive. That would not be a valuable investment. But as I hope I've already established, and I will continue to hammer home, it really works for children who don't experience disability either. And this sequence is really informative of some of the interactions that you see in these spaces. So on the upper left, you see a child, he's got the Batman hat on, climbing up to join his friend who is simulating hanging on to the edge of a hill. It's not that steep, actually. So it's just having fun with this form. They start to engage in this sort of touch of maybe he's trying to knock his friend off the hill, right? That sort of interaction is so valuable to see that the human connection and touch is really, really important. And then you see that he joins him in having the fun by his side. Again, this simple form, this AstroTurf hill, providing so many, such a wide variety of interactions. This was a new feature we designed, and it's just a unique little bump on the hill, right? The epitome of an unstructured piece, really. It's providing a little nook to hide under, which, if you're familiar with children on the autism spectrum, oftentimes what they're looking for is a place to withdraw if the space is too engaging, which these playgrounds often will be. So this offers that little hideaway space. You can see it's for climbing on top of or jumping off of once a child gets their nerve up. Again, simple forms, really allowing for wide variety. And as you can see, just a little bit to the beyond, there's a pathway. And if you've noticed on those drawings, there's a spiral pathway for wheelchair users to get to the very top of the hill. So this form not only allows all these variety of play experiences, but 100% universally accessible to the highest point, which is important, and throughout the middle of it. Because when the play is happening on the hill, we want our friends who use wheels to be in the middle of everything. And finally, I'll share just some examples of the different play experiences outside of the hill that are taking place. Everything really predicated on encouraging group activity and cooperation. So in the upper left, the swing you see there really cannot move without somebody helping. And this is a wonderful thing to see children ask. You'll see two children ask another child, would you push us? They'll take turns. This beautiful cooperation. The spinner, very much the same. We do extra wide slides that have transfer decks so that a caregiver or multiple children can slide together. So if I haven't already established it enough, the Harper's Playground model is really a fusion of three key elements: nature and play through the lens of inclusion. That's our why. That's really why we exist. And that's why our design ethos, we feel, is worth fighting for. I also mentioned we are a nonprofit organization. Harper's Playground is dedicated to sharing this model as widely as possible and to actually helping communities build their own playgrounds. And we're sharing our design model. We're helping with the design process when people invite us to, and we help fund the projects. I was not a nonprofiteer or fundraiser in my earlier life. My previous life, I was a marketing executive at Adidas, as you say. In the US, we call it Adidas. And yet I was thrust into this world when I decided to change my life for Harper. On the left, you see the very first bake sale that we held in front of our home to raise the 1.2 million. Now, I didn't do the sterling conversion for you all, but I think that's about $1 million sterling. $1.2 million was that first Arbor Lodge Park. And we celebrated as a community. I think I really should stress on this as well. What I didn't mention, so on the top of this slide here, tremendous community benefit from the design. Part of our magic of our experience and what we advocate for is involving the community in the process of building these parks. It's really, really vital that you have that buy-in, and a community that feels invited into the design and even funding process, frankly, means they will care about their park more. So I encourage communities to invite everybody into that process. That was our experience from our bake sale to our ribbon cutting. This young boy held his own bake sale about a year after our bake sale to raise a few dollars to pitch into the park. That 1.2 million was so many different sources. And to symbolize some of that, we invited a neighbor, much to the chagrin of my younger daughter, Lennon, who really wanted to do that. We gave her her own small private ceremony so she could get that joy. So we're a nonprofit and we're teaching those methods. And bake sale, we started selling t-shirts. Those were the very first custom hats that we made. We partnered with our local football club. You guys call it football, right? Not soccer, football. They're called the Portland Timbers, and they embraced us. We sold scarves for Harper's Playground and raised, as you can see, $20,375 on the check. Really, really a wonderful experience. What's nice about involving the community in the process is, and this is really important, the building of the play park and how you get there is part of that inclusive community building and the experience and raising awareness. I would say Portland, Oregon, these 10 years later now, is a much more aware community about the importance of inclusion. So it's not just what happens in the playground, but what goes on outside and the impact outside of that. We also love to program at our park. And I think an important part of an inclusive plan, while I think the design is almost enough, if you really get it right, because they will come, you can and must have parties in your park and invite everybody so that the people you've designed your park for are aware of it. And it's also nice to throw a good party. As you'll remember that picture of my father, right? I don't mind a good party. That was the original party man. And community partners will take more pride in maintaining these parks. When you really put your energy into creating a space that has been invested in by the community, that the community has pride in, they will involve themselves in taking care of it. We have to tell corporate partners, no thank you, because of the volume of offers to clean up our park. We would have to clean it up every day if we said yes to everybody. It's really a phenomenal experience. We're engaged in all of these activities, and we have an annual how-to workshop. And while I'll give you a free dissemination of the design towards the end here, we do have an annual workshop where for 2 days we really do a deep dive and explain everything and really help everybody with the process. So that's a little bit about the nonprofit that is Harper's Playground. In 10 years, we now have 11 parks we've helped build. These are just some of those designs. You actually can see Gateway Discovery Park on the upper left. Each one, including a hill and including our model of those 3 levels of inviting design. I'm happy to share the designs with anybody if you'd like to. I beg people to steal our idea. Please take it. Here's our vision of the world. And I often, when I present this image, people get real excited and I say, this is just Photoshop. I've just plopped those on there, but it is actually starting to take place. Here is the Portland metro area where we started. This is how it looks here now. So you see we have several parks completed. and several parks in the process of being built. Very interestingly, in doing my research for you all, the Portland metro area, the physical space, is actually almost the same size as Northern Ireland in square footage. It's very, very close. We have 2.4 million people living in that space, that sort of shaded area that you see there. And I think you guys have about 1.9 million. So I'm going to help show you all how to turn Northern Ireland into a Harper's Playground Mecca. Here's your map, your beautiful country. And here, through the magic of Photoshop, is how I hope it will look soon. Now, interestingly enough, you can and should look to your own physical environment for your inspiration. We actually have ourselves. So I believe, if Google is correct, this is an image from your beautiful country. We copied that in one of our playgrounds already, as you can see on the right, and you can too. So please take your own inspiration. This here as well is an image of a hill that is in Northern Ireland. I forget the name of it, forgive me, but we also have our own hills there. So you have your own inspiration of your own country. I've taken the liberty of looking at a couple of the play parks in your country. First one I'm going to talk about is Anchor Park. It's on the East Coast. As you can see, it's orientation near Belfast, and this is that play park. I believe as it exists today. It's at least what I found through Google Maps. What an incredibly gorgeous location for a playground. We have not yet built our own playground at the edge of the coast like this, but I really look forward to when we do. What you are witnessing here, I hope, in part based on all those images that I shared with you, is a place that is very accessible. Yes, absolutely, nailed it. But the play value here is lacking, and the community connecting is lacking. It's lacking seating. It's lacking nature. I would advocate, when this goes to redesign, to think about planting trees, using boulders, putting in lots of seating, and of course, a Harper's Playground hill right there for massive volumes of play. That's too beautiful of a location for just a big slab of concrete with pieces just placed around like that. Again, wonderfully accessible, but when it's time to replace it, which we all know play parks get replaced, I hope you will think about a natural environment that is universally accessible. The other one is which is much closer to, I believe, the hosts of our meeting here in Derry City, is St. Column's Play Park. This is on the opposite spectrum. This is a wonderfully playable space. This is as structures go, nails it. I think that looks like a great place to play, while still structured and directive. But does that look like an accessible space? I do not see anything thoughtful about children who use wheels to get around whatsoever. And that's really a tragedy, that they would be left to the sidelines and not be able to engage. So just two examples for you all, to hopefully, of the at least 12 from the image I shared, that I hope you'll build in the next 12 years. So I promised you a design case study to help you fix your play parks. So let's jump into that now. This is the old Google map of Arbor Lodge Park, the first park that Harper's Playground built. In that design, what you can see there, and I know it's fuzzy, but that's old Google Maps, is an area of wood chips with the typical playground structure. It also has an old water feature that is that circle space that had been shut down. It used recycled water, and that's now illegal in the US, so it had to be turned off. When we build a water feature, the water has to drain through and feed plants. You can't recycle it. So anyway, this is the Google Map vision of our Arbor Lodge Park, the first Harper's Playground. But here's the schematic drawing from the city plans that we got our hands on. And you can actually see a better example there, the old fountain. And to the right of that, that main space has a small swing set, a small structure, and those 3 lines there are teeter-totters. And so to have you all imagine what it is to redesign a park like that, first we just erase that stuff and envision a different space. It's very, very, very much, you have to design to your space, of course, and then breaking those elements into pieces. I'll share with you that, at least in the US, and I think these are pretty standard, every feature you put into a park has to have fall safety, right? So this is really how laying out the park becomes, in my opinion, so simple. Each feature must have a fall safety protection around it. So you can see the swing set area, the dotted lines reveal to you the fall safety spaces and the separation each feature has to have. You have your existing space, you have your features, and you literally just start placing them in there. Now, of course, there's a lot of logic. You want to place your swings based on sunlight. You don't want to have it facing direct sun exposure. You want to face the swings away. There's all these different things, but in essence, it's a very simple thing to just lay this out. And then that will also tell you your surfacing. So this is an image of the surfacing. There's rubber surfacing where the swings are. There's that AstroTurf, a lot of concrete area. But again, it's a very, very simple yet profound differences. You can see our two circular seating spaces. That's the as-built I had shared with you previously. And then here's what it looks like in relation to the community. The most important part of any design process is choosing your location. And if you're going to invest in a very special space, you want to choose your location wisely, of course. Interestingly enough, for us, we chose it because it was our neighborhood park. And that was the path, that Arbor Lodge park path there that we walked on with Harper, remember, in the beginning of the presentation? When we got the train rolling on our project, we had to hit the pause button and actually really assess whether or not all this effort to create a really special space made sense for this actual park. And luckily for us, of course, one of the most important things was that the structure that existed there was old enough that it needed to be replaced. And so that was really one of the most important things. You can see it's adjacent to a school, this Chief Joseph School. To the right-hand side of your picture is a reason this was a good design space, because it has a natural feed to a lot of children. It has the tennis courts, it has a football pitch, 2 baseball pitches. It's adjacent to a lot of mass transportation, plenty of parking. These are all the things, of course, as you decide which of the priority parks in Northern Ireland you are all going to choose for your first Harper's Playground. Choose wisely on your location. And there's many other reasons this was a good location. You can see the existing tree canopy there. I highly recommend existing tree canopies and/or planting a lot of trees immediately if you decide you're going to be building a park. The sooner they've grown larger, the better the space will feel. It's a very important part of it. But as you can see, we really lucked out, and it's a great space. I will share with you all, and this is really important to this week for you and for my story. When Harper was preparing to enter school, Chief Joseph and the school system told us she was not welcome there. They tried to convince us that it was for her benefit because there was a school across town that could serve her better. but it really was for their benefit. They didn't want to deal with her. It was one of the most painful parts of this journey for me. I believe so deeply in community and being and knowing your neighbors and being connected to them. And so that experience, while painful, certainly fueled my fire to get our park built. So I thank them for that. And I maybe wanted to make that park so good that they would love it and they would regret missing out on the chance to have Harper at their school. And I think that prompts me to share. I think hopefully nailed the value of play for people. And of course, I feel like everyone actually inherently knows there's this value of nature, but I don't think I've truly nailed the importance of inclusion yet. Inclusion is important, not just because it's the right thing to do for the child who's being left out and the harm that's done to them, but there's really a phenomenal harm to a community that leaves these special children out. Harper has gifts to share with the world, and that school missed out on getting to know Harper more than Harper missed out on getting to go to that school. And this is why inclusion matters. Every one of us is endowed with very, very special gifts, and communities that allow those special gifts to be wasted are really missing out. This is why we should include everybody, not because of the harm it does to them. Of course, that's important, but because we're actually missing. So here's what Arbor Lodge Park looked like before we transformed it, and here's what it turned into. It really is an entirely different experience. So highly recommend this. I have a couple of things to share as we get to the question and answer part. Big fan of these two books. Peter Block's book on community and the structure of belonging. I'm actually I'll read both of these, but this is really important as you think about a possibly higher cost up front of building a playground correctly. And I will say this right now, the cost over the long term is less. When you build the space like this, our boulders alone will last, I believe, at least 1,000 years. A typical playground structure lasts about 20. So if you invest wisely, you will see amortization over time. And if you build a play park that serves an average of, say, 10 to 15 kids on any day, and then you change that to a park that is serving 100, 200 kids a day, well, isn't that a better investment? So let's talk about cost, though. The argument against great design is always cost and speed. This discussion about cost and speed is not really about cost and speed. It is an agenda that declares that human experience is a low priority. The argument against the importance of the aesthetic is an argument against human freedom. In every case, low cost and fast action are really an argument against the dignity of citizens and a more democratic and humanely inclusive process. These words ring so true in my heart because everywhere I go, people are asking me about cost. What does it cost? What's the difference in cost? What is the cost about designing a community poorly? I'll tell you what, it is profound. Investing in a good community space pays you back 100, 1,000-fold. So there's no good argument against doing this right. This other one, A Pattern Language, is a really beautiful book about good design. I actually can't read it because our images are covering it, but you guys can see it. It really resonates with me as a community member who involved myself in the design process through the lens of advocating for my daughter. I do believe that high-paid designers overstress a complication about the design process that's not really true. The best design will come from a place of empathy, not from some master training at some university. Good design comes from people who care deeply about the people who are going to engage the space. So again, I highly encourage you to involve people in the process. That's still the lens I take to the design process myself. And finally, just to share how important this really is, I'll just remind you all why we're doing this. This image came to us a few years after we opened our first park, and it of course sticks with me tremendously. This is a very segregated, typical school where children with severe disabilities are in Portland, Oregon, and the park across the street from their school is entirely inaccessible. And this injustice must end. This reality must change. These children must have a natural play park across the street from their school that they can engage with. And so with that, I would love to turn this over to some questions. I'm sure I've missed some things or hopefully inspired some questions. And then I have a few slides at the end just to wrap it all up. But I really look forward to answering some questions now.
Hi, Cody. I've been sent through some questions in the private method there. But firstly, can I just say, so far, I'm personally blown away, Cody. I feel like I just want to get up off this seat now and go out and build a Harper's playground. Honestly, I'm so inspired. I'm so motivated. I'm overwhelmed with your passion. I really, and I get it. Importantly, I get it. And I am so thankful that you have shared your knowledge and experience with us. I'm blown away. But I do have some questions for you, okay?
Good.
And one question came in, and has any Harper playgrounds been funded through councils or governments, or have they all been community fundraising? Cody, could you let us know?
Great. That's an awesome question. The funding mechanisms for the 11 parks that I've mentioned have run the gamut from completely funded by city government agencies to not at all, $0, and everything in between. They've run the gamut, and so the conditions certainly are different by community. Some communities are very, very affluent and they have a lot of money, and while that has been the case, I've still encouraged them to find a way to involve the community in the process as best they can. The funding part of the process, for some reason, I've just looked at that as a fun way to do it. The cliche in the word fundraising, it starts with fun. The community I grew up in Northern California was always having fundraisers. And I think it's just a good community building activity, frankly, but it's not, it's either way is okay, of course. But yeah, all our projects have run the gamut. I love when I'm paid to come in and help a park get designed. That's awesome. As a manager of a nonprofit, our funding is very much, it's a hamster wheel to continually be seeking out funding. We're not guaranteed any year's budget. One of the examples you can find on our website was a park we helped design in Tokyo, Japan. Our partner was Nike. They have plenty of money. So fundraising was not an issue for that particular project. But so yeah, they run the gamut. I just encourage some level of engaging the community to have ownership over their park in some way.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Cody. I have another question here that was sent privately to as well. Do you know, when it comes to these designs, Cody, how do traditional play park designers accept your methods? And do they take much convincing? Is there much work to be done from that side?
There is. That's a really good question. Time and again, very, very high paid professionals tell me that what I've already done is impossible. And I think that's a really fascinating conversation to have. They are convinced somehow that there must be compromise. It's almost a cognitive dissonance in a professional who's been trained to somehow believe that You cannot have universal accessibility and a very, very playable space for children who have no disability. That's the hang up. They actually approach the work incorrectly, from my opinion. They're entering the work thinking about compromise rather than thinking about commitment to doing it all the way. And once you're thinking about compromise, you'll find ways to compromise. You'll find reasons that it might not be possible. So yeah, there is a big part of my work that is arguing against people that are telling me I cannot do what I've already done. And so I do actually appreciate that usually. I don't like when I'm showing up for free and they're highly paid and I have to argue with them, but it's, the passion for this work is so strong, and seeing people's minds change, which they often will, especially when we give them a tour of the playground. I'm continually trying to work on the images that can convince. Often the thing that really convinces people is physically entering the space and seeing it happen. So some of our videos help do that. But yeah, the question is a good one. And I think there's many industries beyond just playgrounds where the people that have gotten accustomed to a status quo that is unacceptable don't like to be told they're doing it all wrong. And so, yeah, I'm not always the most popular guy in the room, especially with the people who sell those features. But as we've established, play is too important. Community spaces aren't too important to compromise. And I don't believe that in this space, we have to compromise getting it right. Sometimes it might take a little extra long to build the park, or might have to find the money. But from a design standpoint, there's absolutely no reason to not get it right.
Thank you. Cody, thanks very much. That's very invaluable. And what I do think is sometimes when you're working around access and inclusion, I could echo some of your comments there in regards to how to change mindsets and challenge mindsets. So that is very useful to hear from you as well. I do have some more questions for you as well.
Good.
Claire has asked from Outdoor Recreation, should or could be integrated into every public realm scheme in Northern Ireland. And she said that maybe never mind upgrades, such an opportunity for better community and cohesion through play. So she is really saying, really grasping that concept of Harper's Playground and how that could be embedded, in a regional process throughout Northern Ireland.
Was there a question in there?
Just to feed into the cost, the excuse for cost of these types of installations, when it comes to public realm, that's something that I've always tried to intervene with through various parts of my career, because these are huge pockets of money being spent to effectively just repave the streets with gold, but not actually change anything about how they're used. And I just think that that's prime opportunity to get it right in the first place. And I know, Belfast has its C.S. Lewis Square there. It is really just a public realm square, but it's more than that. It's got artwork, it's got hummocky hills that kids climb all over, it's got a big split rock that kids climb all over and have picnics at, it's got programs of activities, and it wasn't designed to be a Harper's Playground. It just happens to have been a success that is very inclusive.
C.S. Lewis Square.
Yeah. The Narnia author, C.S. Lewis.
Yes. I just was making sure. I've heard. Is there a question in there? I'm sorry.
No, sorry, there wasn't. It was just me spouting off about the opportunity.
Oh, great. Yeah, I think, well, I'll just, if I can echo one of the points you just made that I think is so important, is that a successful Harper's Playground model, or an accessible space for children, is very often not designed specifically for play. As I've mentioned, what children want most is to choose their own play space and their own pathway forward. And so that's why it's important to not overly focus on play features. Good design will allow that a lot of play will happen in the areas not specifically for play. So minimal play features, maximum flexibility use space like that. So yeah, children, if you observe children at play enough, you'll realize they avoid playgrounds often to play adjacent to the playground. They you know, so this really must inform designing spaces that eventually we hope will be used for play. And that's a great example of how that works.
Cody, I have a final two queries here for yourself. Angela has asked, you've mentioned about annual workshops. How do these operate and who can access them, please?
Well, as we were discussing before everyone joined us, I think moving forward, every year we'll have quite a robust digital component to it. The vision for the first one, which was 2 years ago, in 2019, or sorry, 2018 was the first one. It was very much only a live event, hosted in Portland, Oregon. People came from all over, and I do think one of the more valuable parts of the workshop is the guided tours that we take at the actual playgrounds. So I would encourage people to book their tickets, $1,810 US, based on the earlier slide I shared, to come to Portland, and depending on if travel is safe then. But how it works is we really go in deeply into all of the design choices, and I especially outline all of the different features you might think about putting into your park, and if you're only going to put 3 or 4, which ones have the greatest value and why you should choose them. So it's heavy design. We do talk about funding and process management and budgeting as well. And then we cover what we call the process overall, which is beginning to end, including maintenance, including programming at the space. So those are the 3 key focus areas that we cover. It's May 10th and 11th this coming year. And because of COVID-19 and because we want to make it accessible, it will be very much available online as well.
Thank you very much, Cody. And you're right, you know, through COVID, we may have to navigate our way through different opportunities that can arise. Now, I do have a final conversation or query from Ross. Ross has said, sometimes sourcing of the items would be challenging, for example, the cave structure. Where would one source such items? Are they off-the-shelf suppliers, for example?
I'm sorry, which structure was that?
Well, I'll invite Ross to have a further conversation with you here, Ross, if you'd like to join.
Yeah, you showed a picture, Cody, of the grass mound, and on top of it was a little cave with children all sitting underneath it. And you talked about them jumping off the top of it, and children with autism staying underneath it. A lovely structure, but where on earth would I even begin to try and find something like that?
So I would say that piece, as well as the sand table that I showed to you all, that elevated sand table, those are very, very just custom pieces. The community of builders that we reached out to for both of those are the ones who build the exhibits in zoos. So they're both sort of simulated rock, right? It's a plaster sort of piece. And I think that's really where I would stress minimal off-the-shelf items, maximum custom as much as possible. So the hill, I still will advocate that the hill is everything. And that mound that you mentioned is a cool part of the hill, essentially. But yeah, so it's literally the zoo exhibit world is the best place to think about finding the craftspeople that could do that type of work. It's masonry, basically. It's concrete forming. universe, and good construction house should be able to help navigate that. And I'm happy to help as best I can.
Thank you very much, Cody. Cody, just to say as well, throughout the chat box, individuals, and there's a range of different, so many to mention, but everybody's found it very inspirational. Just thought it, and thanking you very much for your conversation and your information today as well.
It was my absolute pleasure. I can't thank you enough for inviting me into your universe there. I especially appreciated doing a lot of research on Northern Ireland. I think it's a wonderful place to embrace this movement, and I can't wait to come visit. But yeah, I had a few last slides just to hopefully put a bow on this conversation. So I'll go into those now. First and foremost, I'm a father committed to the experience of having my daughter embraced in the world. And I'm very proud of her for the impact she has made. And just one very, very moving story to share with you all on the impact of this work. This little girl, Juliana, lived a very, very short 5 years. She had medical complications that not only forced her to spend most of her time in a hospital bed, but if she ever left that hospital bed, it was in a wheelchair. And they lived just about an hour's drive from Harper's playground. And they went and visited one time before she passed. And that had been such a moving experience for her that when a family friend offered to help her mother write a book about her life, her very short life, she wanted to talk about this playground that she had visited in her book. It was basically the focus of the first chapter of the book. And I learned about her story after she had passed, and one of her caregivers reached out to ask me how to make a gift to Harper's Playground in her name. So this really, really, of course, sticks with me. The fact that she had only been there one time was in large part because it was an hour's drive, and that's a big thing that was a big thing for their family. So my passion for this work before I had this story was already pretty next level. Realizing that she should have had a park 5 minutes from her house that she could go to is an extra reason why I push so hard for this. It's very, very important. I just cannot stress this enough. Harper doesn't really care that much about her park. She doesn't use very much of it. And I think she would say, if she could talk, that it's not such a big deal. She would probably say, "Dad, take it easy." But she loves to swing there. And very rarely it's quiet. This is, I think, sunset evening where she's enjoying her swing. And she doesn't mind swinging alone, but on occasion, she's joined by a lot of kids. And that, again, I will remind you, is right across the street from where she was told she wasn't welcome to go to school. And so having a park where she was invited was very, very important. And even her old dad gets to swing with her, which is pretty sweet. So with that, I really, really thank you all for attending, for allowing me to share my story and my passion. And I do hope that I'll be there soon to help you open up your first Harper's Playground. So thank you all very, very much.
Thank you so much, Cody. Thank you so much. And we do look forward to talking with you again and having further discussions. And we see this as a start of a beautiful relationship moving forward.
That sounds good to me.
Thank you so much.